Hi guys, Paul here, and today I am just doing a little video to follow up on a post I did the other day. And that post was about insurance when you're doing a Bowdrill friction fire. Now for those of you that didn't see it, the idea was about using different materials to capture an ember off your initial ember so that you've always got one spare should your initial ember fail. So traditionally, Bowdrill is done with a bit of bark or a bit of leaf or something along those lines underneath your notch where the dust collects, and so that your ember doesn't fall into the ground and you don't lose it. Now that's all well and good, it works perfectly fine, and that's the way most people do it. But a little trick you can do, and just something as a bit of just have a little bit of extra knowledge, a little bit of help for when you're doing demonstrations, or if you think you're going to struggle with your tinder bundle. This is a good way of having something in the background that you can use just to help you along. And essentially what we're doing is, instead of just having a bit of bark underneath our notch here where our dust collects, what we do is use a bit of this. Now this is horseshoe fungus, or Fomus fomentarius as the Latin amongst us might know it. And underneath this hard shell here, there's a really fine layer of fibres. It's called the trauma layer, just underneath this hard shell, usually more towards the top of the fungus here. The bigger the fungus, usually the thinner the trauma layer is. So younger specimens are better for collecting amadou, which is what we call the fine fibrous material from underneath the hard shell. That's it there. So as you can see, it's really nice and fine. This stuff's actually like 3 or 4 years old. I've had it sitting in my bedroom for ages. And the idea is, instead of using an ember pan of bark or leaf or whatever you might choose to use, we use this. Now the reason we use this is because of how fibrous it is. Once the ember has formed on top of this material and we leave it to sort of consolidate on top of it, this will actually start smouldering underneath your initial ember as well. So by doing that, we're not only creating an ember through the use of our Bowdrill kit, but we're also using the ember to create another ember. Now, why might that be useful? Well, Bowdrill embers, they can, we've got a burn time of maybe about 5 minutes if you're lucky, if it's a nice chunky one. Something like this burns much hotter, and I would expect a piece like this to sort of smoulder for maybe 10 minutes. Now the reason that might be useful to us is because if you're having trouble with your material, if your dry grass isn't so dry, or if your materials are just not packed properly, or any number of variables that might happen to cause your material not to work, that could result in you losing your ember, your initial ember. Then you have this to fall back on. So this is where the insurance comes in, because when your first ember fails, you've got this, and this is your insurance. Now, it could be that you might blow your ember to pieces, it could be that it gets ruined through dampness or whatever. What this does is enable you to have 10 minutes to sort of regather yourself, to be able to go, right, well I need to fix this, and I need to do that to be able to make this work. Having this lets you have that time. Now, whether this be doing demonstrations or whatever it might be, just having that little bit extra can really make the difference. Anyway, I'm sure you're all sick of the sound of my voice by now, so I will do a little demonstration and show you just how this works. Now, unfortunately, because I'm left-handed, I'll have to turn my board around towards me, so you won't be able to actually see the notch and what's happening. But essentially what I'm doing is, I'm still going to have my bark underneath, and then on top of that I'm going to sit my amadou, which isn't really prepared in any way, it's just dry and I've just cut it off, that's all it is. It's not been beaten or soaked in pee or anything like that. And then what I'm going to do is sit my board on top of that, so the ember forms in the notch directly on top of the amadou. So let's see if this works. It better after me doing all that talking. So, as always, one of the biggest things with Bowdrill is just making sure you're comfortable. You know, making sure that you're happy, that everything's feeling right, your board's set up properly. I'm going to take this off. So I'm using spruce for the board and white pine for the spindle, and my bearing block is a bit of vertebrae, which actually looks incredibly uncomfortable, but I find that you can wrap your fingers around here and really bear down on it because it's got this little bit sticking out here, so it gives you somewhere to really apply pressure. And obviously there's a lot of bone here, which means this will last for quite a while. So let's give it a whirl. So just making sure everything's set up nicely. Okay, I'm happy with that. I can see the Amadou in between my notch, and so I'm ready to go. Okay, so we have an ember there. I'm just going to knock it out, but leave the board where it is, so that the notch is acting as a bit of a cradle for the ember on top of the Amadou. Okay, now I'm going to take you guys over so you can see what's going on. Now, I'm using the front camera on my phone here, which is a terrible idea. But hopefully you can see there the ember on top of the Amadou. I can't see on my phone screen, so I'm hoping you guys can see it. Now the idea is we're just going to let that sit there. Whenever you make an ember, using the Bowdrill technique, just always give it a minute to sort of consolidate itself. Now I can actually smell the horseshoe starting to burn. It's got a very distinctive smell. It's quite nice. So I know it's starting to do the trick. So I'm just going to give it a wee while longer. Now, let's say that we're happy with that, and we go and take our ember and use it in our dry grass. So we tip our ember off into our dry grass, give it a tap. Now doing this with one hand is near impossible, so what I'm going to do is get a bit rough with it. So there is an ember there still. It's not much of an ember, but there is one there. Now let's say that we lose that. Hopefully you can see it there. Okay, so I've just blown that away. I've totally ruined my ember. So that could, that could be me not being able to blow it into the grass properly, or it falling through the grass, or any of those scenarios we talked about earlier. But because I have made my ember on top of this Amadou, I now have this to fall back on. Hopefully you can see that. So that Amadou is now entirely self-sufficient, burning off its own steam. That was a bit of a one-take wonder, but I hope it did the trick. And if any of you guys have any questions or anything, then just fire them in a message and I'll do my best to answer them for you. But it's an incredible little skill to have, just to be able to have that little bit extra. And you can see how hot that's burning there. But there's a few different materials you can use. You can use char cloth, you can use charred punk wood, you can use King Alfred's cakes, you can use actual charcoal from your previous fire. There's a whole host of different things you can use, but this one I find is the easiest and most convenient to use, because you can cut it into a nice flat section and utilise it that way. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope this hasn't been too rambly. I hope it's done the trick, and I'll see you all soon.